Good afternoon, all. Good evening. I'd like to welcome you to the November 9th Human Affairs and Racial Conciliation Commission meeting. I note 7 of the 13 commissioners are in the room, so we do have a quorum. As is customary, let's have a moment of silence, urging us first to take a deep breath in and then breathe out the negative influences, experiences of the day, those factors that have disturbed us that might get in the way of us being able to communicate with each other openly. Breathe out. Now that we've gotten rid of those things, let's have a moment of silence, focusing on our work. Thank you. I've checked with the clerk. We had not had anyone sign in or request a public comment, but I do note that we have two individuals who'd like to address the group. I'll come to one of the open mics right here, and you can please give us your name and address and affiliation.
Suzanne Hardy, 32 Prelude Street, downtown. I'm a longtime member of Cajun and a co-chair of our policing committee. For those not familiar with Charleston Area Justice Ministry, which is probably just a few of you, we're a grassroots, non-political, nonprofit, widely diverse in membership, and with over 40 committed and primarily faith-based organizations. We address and deliver meaningful outcomes for social justice issues like housing, healthcare, education, and policing from a systemic view, holding officials accountable for fair policies and practices. Back in 2015, we voted to tackle the issue of racial disparities in policing. This stemmed from the hundreds of stories we heard from our Black members of discriminatory treatment by CPD. Our research indicated an audit for racial bias was the appropriate first step to align the city behind the findings and next steps to reduce disparities. It took us a couple of difficult years to gain City Council's agreement. We finally got the completed audit recommendations almost 4 years ago to this day. Time flies, right? Implementation progress has been slow, especially the focus on confirmed racial disparities. COVID, of course, played a role in that. Proactive communication from CPD and the city to the community, which is a key part of the audit's recommendation, has been minimal, to be generous, and only where CAJM has intervened. Last year, we did finally gain commitment from former Chief Reynolds and 3 city council members for CPD to host with CAJM periodic community meetings to share the results from the racial bias audit, especially the racial disparity data and next steps that CPD was going to take. Unfortunately, that commitment and our planned first meeting fell through with the CPD leadership change. You may ask why we remain committed and persistent after all these years to complete the recommendations. Well, like most of you, we want Charleston to be a fair and equitable city for all citizens. And we want to ensure that Charleston is a safe city for citizens and for our police. We believe the city can only be safe when the community and police are working in partnership, when we're having meaningful dialogue and difficult conversations, and when citizens feel they can trust police because there are transparent and frequent communications. That brings me to why we're here today. 2 key pieces of data have recently become available. One, an online survey by CPD to solicit input from the community on how they're perceived. And second, and most important, is the long-awaited external assessment of CPD's progress on implementing the recommendations of the audit. An overview summary of these results is set to be shared with Public Safety and City Council next Tuesday. We want to assure these results are transparently shared directly with the community and in a timely manner. Right now, as we've talked with CPD, they don't have any plans to communicate the results at this time. The Charleston community has been waiting since 2019 to hear about learnings and progress on implementing the audit's recommendation, we shouldn't allow further delay. We're asking HARC to also call for timely and transparent dialogue with the broad community on these research. We're elevating this request to you because history tells us we need a lot of community pressure to hold CPD and city accountable to deliver on commitments, especially those relevant to the racial bias audit. We know that publishing a report on a website is not enough. We need deliberate and intentional dialogue where acknowledged disparities are openly discussed and a concrete plan for their reduction is presented to the community. For our part, CAJM remains committed to follow up on the racial bias audit and the racial disparities reduction, and continue to offer to work with CPD and/or the city to help plan the community meetings, to help develop a successful presentation that makes sense to the public, and to get people to show up, which is the most important thing. We urge HARC to join us in speaking up to the City Council and to demand public communication. Thank you. And thank you for indulging me for a couple extra minutes. Thank you.
How you doing? Good evening. My name is Arthur McFarland, and I'm a member of St. Patrick Catholic Church. I live at 204 Grove Street, downtown. I am also a former co-president of the Charleston Area Justice Ministry. So Suzanne took her time, but I hope she didn't take any of mine. But I'm here today again on behalf of CAJM's Charleston Policing Committee to discuss the vital role of HARC in our community's journey toward equity, inclusion, and racial conciliation. It is our understanding that the core purpose of HARC is to champion equity, inclusion, and racial conciliation concerning all aspects of institutional and community discrimination. Now, I previously served on your predecessor commission, the Special Commission on Equity, Inclusion, and Racial Conciliation, and specifically, I served on the subcommittee for criminal justice reform. In April 2021, the subcommittee, after careful research, proposed several long-term goals. And among those long-term goals was public safety. This goal asked the city and CPD to take deliberate action against racial hatred, bias, systemic racism, and the oppression of Blacks and other marginalized groups. And our objectives, as we set out in that report, included reimagining delivery of policing services to achieve unbiased policing, procedural justice, and racial conciliation. And another objective, of course, which is probably as serious as any, was to build a mutually respectful, trustful relationship between citizens and CPD. Now, I encourage you all to review that April 2021 report if you have not already done so, as you consider recommendations that you will make to the mayor and city council regarding the development of a comprehensive racial equity framework, which encompasses certainly criminal justice reform. We must acknowledge that the path to criminal justice reform in Charleston does in fact go through you all, goes through HARC, which is positioned to assert its voice in bringing about substantive changes in our community. We earnestly ask you to insist on transparent and engaging communication from the city and CPD throughout this process. It is only through open, honest, and continuous dialogue, as Suzanne has said, that we can rebuild the bridges of trust between our community and law enforcement. The importance of this dialogue cannot be overstated. It is the cornerstone of reconciliation. And so we call upon HARC to ensure that the voices of our community are heard and the necessary actions are taken to address racial disparities. First step to this is to demand, as Susan just mentioned, that CPD hosts community meetings to discuss the results of the external assessment of implementation of the racial bias audit recommendations. Now, we stand ready to assist in any way we can to encourage community members to attend those meetings. But let us collectively, during this remainder of 2023 and throughout 2024, make this a period of progress, healing, and reconciliation. Thank you all for the time.
Mr. Chairman, might I ask the judge a clarifying question about you? I thought I wrote down that you said you wanted us to read the report from April of
2021.
Okay, and is that this report that ended up on the council's?
It should be, it's included in that report.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
correct.
So
We
your
issued our
committee
report
submitted
in
in April.
April
Okay, all right.
2021,
I
and
just
then it
wanted
was
to make sure
combined with that. That's
We had
correct.
it all. Okay.
That's right.
thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to, individual in the public like to address the group? If not, we'll move on. Thank you.
I just have one question. I would love to have a copy of both of your comments to us tonight. And so if you would get those to Adrian so she can get them out to us, that would be great.
Actually, give them to Jasmine.
Or to Jasmine. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you again. Thank you again for your comments. The next item on our agenda is the approval. The next item on our agenda is approval of the minutes of September 14th that were previously disseminated in anticipation of our October meeting, which was canceled or delayed. My question is, and those minutes are not in this packet. They were previously disseminated. Are we comfortable acting on the minutes, having read them previously? If so, I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we accept those minutes.
Okay. Moved and properly second that we accept the minutes of the September 14th meeting. Just to highlight for purposes of the public, there was a presentation on the Moja Festival during that meeting, and also a presentation to the commission on the Peninsula Plan process and the like, and the commission members began discussion of the priorities in terms of recommendations to go to City Council, which we're continuing this evening. That was the primary essence of that meeting on the 14th. Motion properly moved and second, and those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Abstentions, so ordered. We do have on our desk, and it's not listed on the agenda, but I want to note that the notes from a series of notes from the October 20th work session has been disseminated, and thank you, Jasmine, for providing that. In essence, because we had a quorum to comply with the Sunshine Law, we do have notes from the meeting. You'll note the commissioners that were present, we had 10 divisions of city government represented, the equity team core. The meeting was facilitated by Good Stock Consultants, and also present was Marla Robinson from the Riley Community Assistance Project, who's been working with us. Having seen the notes, is there a motion to receive these? Receive it. October 20th. Is there a second? Second by Bob. Further discussion? All those in favor of receiving the notes from the October 20th, 23 meeting, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Abstentions, so ordered. So the next item on the agenda is the chairperson's comments. And I don't see Jason on the screen. He is traveling. The major comments I'd like to share is that we have obviously experienced worldwide the impact of the Israeli-Hamas confrontation. and it's impacted all of us in ways that are serious. And in fact, our September meeting was not held because of a coming together of the community. October meeting was not held because we're coming together, and we would have the meeting at that time. Also, I don't think any of us could have missed the conversations and issues and debates going on at the Charleston County School District, which have human affairs and racial conciliation issues and challenges associated with that. Good news, the Mosher Festival happened, and it was 8 or 9 days of uplifting activity, and I know a number of commissioners participated in some of the activities. It's also reported that the nonprofit 501c3 papers have been filed and and that corporation will be moving forward. So as we look forward to seeing next steps on that's good news. There are a number of events that we were invited to as commissioners. May have attended the Anson Street Burial Ground Monument kickoff reception and the business incubator $2 million check received from the state earlier this month. But the big thing that happened was that we had our visioning session. And I can report to you that the leadership team, that's Jason, myself, and Adrian, had met with Good Stock, and we established a schedule rolling forward. We're going to meet on Friday to take a look at the notes that she has from that session to come up with a draft of what we will call an action plan. That draft will be available to us on the 17th of November. Between the 20th of November and the 1st of December, we'll disseminate that to members of HARC and the equity core team. Core team for comments. Those comments coming back will be shared, and we'll have another work session with the HARC leads and Good Stock to finalize a document that will be circulated to HARC on the 7th of December, which is a week before our December 14th meeting. So we're hoping, and again, that action strategy is encompassing. And the work that we're about to do today actually is an element of that, because one component of the agenda has to do with recommendations that go to City Council. That's work that we've been working on since May. And that's our next step in that regard. Also want to put a note, the Trident United Way issued a report, and Carol Jackson brought it to my attention, and we should probably circulate it. There's a model analysis of economic well-being of families called the American Limited Income Constrained and Employed, ALICE. The model was adopted, and I'm familiar with it, from New Jersey, and the Trident United Way and folks across South Carolina have applied that, and so that data is available. In essence, what it says is that there's a amount of money that's necessary, individual income or family income necessary to be able to afford housing, food, and healthcare. That's higher than the poverty level. So they take the people who are in poverty and the folks who don't have that money and say that number of percentage of families are in need below the ALICE level. That percentage of people in South Carolina is 43%. The statewide number, as I recall, for what the income needs to be is about $17.50 for an individual statewide, but in the Charleston area, because of the higher costs associated with housing, is closer to $20. So again, this is all just information, and as we think about a question or discussions about economic empowerment, housing and mobility. This is all the context, and hopefully the policymakers will take some of that into account. We'll circulate that and perhaps ask Trident United Way to do a workshop with us and perhaps in a broader community discussion about what Alistair means in the context of our mission and sometime in the future.
Just lady I was working with that had been working her way out of homelessness. And she put it very succinctly. She said, most people here either have 2 homes or 2 jobs. Because there's very affluent, that's got a summer home here or somewhere else. Everybody else has got to have at least 2 jobs just to be here. And I think a very succinct way of addressing what you just said. Thank you.
Yeah, I personally think that this is a very opportune document for HARC to attach itself to after, we've been better educated about what can really be done on the various levels of government and financing and, subsidies that are available through all the layers we know some about. To me, I was talking to my commission colleague, Mr. Orth, today, and I sort of revisited what I've always heard in my nonprofit career is that people who don't have let's just call it the natural inclination to say, of course, society needs to take care of all of us. And it starts with the least of us and goes forward to those who don't really need that kind of societal assistance. The people who have that bent, and I'm showing my bias, but that they comfort themselves by saying that, well, there's plenty of opportunities for people to take hold of if people that don't have the money to basically have a lifestyle that they would want, then they just need to get up and go and get out and go. And it's sort of a I think a very robust mindset that sets in to people who've never experienced a life of working poverty, who have no understanding of working your brains out. Two jobs is average. 3 and 4 jobs is, what's required in this day and age. So I do feel like this is going to give us a really good, not cover, but a good framework by which we'll be able to take hold of what's legitimate data-driven information by a body that everyone that I feel in the Tri-County region greatly respects. And I'm really proud that they have taken this on and are going to promote it. So I would strongly urge us to invite whoever needs to come from Trident United Way to sit with us. Thanks for bringing it up, Jerry.
Members of the commission, since May, we've been wrestling with the question of what should our priorities be as it relates to recommending actions to city council. We generated, I believe, in September or August, a list of priorities, listening in the categories of housing mobility, economic empowerment, criminal justice reform, history and culture, and environmental justice. We left out the internal review and youth and education components, which were the other 2 elements of the special commission report. Having gotten that list, we then sent it back to us and said, each of us identify the top 3 from the list. And also with the request that went to the commissioners for writing some clarifying language in case folks had questions in terms of that. We circulated those documents and then came back to you again and said, give us 3. Adrian was kind enough to assemble those documents and give us the information. From the initial analysis, she indicated that actually we had 8 of the 13 commissioners submitted something. The union peer involvement around a special district, special impact district, received 6 votes. The amendments to the bar, and what's bar stand for again, Carol?
Board of Architecture.
The Board of Architecture Review Amendment, right, received 6 votes, and the racial bias assessment received 5 votes. So those were the top 3. We then asked Adrian to go back and share with everybody how folks rated their 3 or anything that was on the top 3 list. So we now have those 3, all right, kind of weighted, and also a list of another, I think it's 7 or 8 items that did not make the top 10. Okay, but in fact, were mentioned as amongst the 3 priorities. So, discussion about reaction to this ranking of questions or clarifying things that we want to talk about. Our notion here is that if there's agreement, right, we then move to what's necessary to move. One of the things that we talked about doing tonight was to invite folks from planning. Was it? Yeah, for the BAR, since that. Yeah. Yeah, so the whole, for us to get familiar with the language, all right, so that we could in fact interact around that. That was our notion. But to back up, what are your feelings and reactions to these rankings?
I'm heartened that it does feel like there was some broad consensus areas amongst the group. I will admit that I'm not sure when I gave my 3, I was necessarily prioritizing 1, 2, 3. These were 3 that I all thought were important that I wanted to put forward. And I can't remember, and maybe it's because of what's going on now with the Board of Education, but why did we not include education in this go round?
So what happened was no one put, when we just generated a list, no one put an item that spoke to education. So that category, that's why the category was missing.
Well, Jerry, I think that goes further back than that. When we were forming working groups to volunteer to, do some
That's
extra
true.
work as the commission, Jason Saccharin said he wanted to table work on youth and basically it's youth and health, right? Health and welfare. So he thought that deserved, this is my remembrance. I wish he were here to say what he really meant, but that he thought that deserved more holistic work between the city and the school system and HARC and whatever groups were being formed out of the school system that were still in process to take on racial equity, DEI issues. That's what I remember. And that was like way back in the spring, I would say. So we basically just tabled it. And I don't think we ever, then we're invited to put any of those recommendations back on a priority
Might be
list.
time to untable it.
Yeah. And while I'm speaking, because I agree with Adam that when I received the send your 3, and I sent more, of course. But I didn't know that we were supposed to rank them in 1, 2, 3. So mine are just like you said. I can go with any of the things on this sheet of paper, mine or anyone else's. They're all important.
So can I say this? So when in order of the ranking, so it's okay if you necessarily didn't put your top 1, 2, and 3, because the initial ranking, I did the most common. So the initial one that I sent to the co-chairs, what Jerry said was still the overall theme. So it was 6 for not racial bias assessment. That was 5. And then the bar was 6. So in everyone's list, it was listed somewhere. And so I initially did what was the most common, and then we drilled down into the numbers.
Yeah, I agree with others that, the things that are on here are fine. That's, they're things that need to be worked on, but I mentioned this, I think it was at the last meeting or the one before then. I'm an engineer and, to me, I'd like to have a table of, okay, what are the priorities and why are they the priorities? How many people are impacted? What's the ultimate cost? A list of, and for me, it's, I think that clearly takes time. And, in a lot of ways, a lot of people say, well, gee, that's going to take forever to do that. But I do think that then gets us to having discussion about, well, why are we choosing this? Is it going to impact the greatest number of people, the citizens of Charleston? Is it, is the financial impact the greatest? What are the, because the way I look at it now, we're saying, well, I feel like this is the top priority. Well, why do you feel like this is the top priority? And so for me, I would be more comfortable having a discussion about, how we prioritize these and what are the reasons behind it. And I think the conversation to get there would be very fruitful for us to have. So again, these are fine. For me, I voted for all three for dealing with what I consider to be current affordable housing issues, which are, we have some affordable housing and it is not being taken care of the way it should be. I find it hard to support having more of something that 10 years from now might look as bad as what we have now. So prepare, and I don't know, I'm not a council person, so I don't understand, how affordable housing continuation gets handed off from city council or county council or tri-county or state or whatever. But it's an abomination for people to have to deal with what we've seen in the newspaper, it shouldn't happen. And so I have passion to say we need to take care of that before we start piling on more affordable, and obviously it's going to take a while to get there, but hopefully we'll have in process then something that says, well, this is how we're going to ensure that over time, when we have affordable housing units, they're going to be maintained in a fashion that allows the people who live there to have good livability and not be constantly struggling with having someone take care of it. So those are two things I would share.
Thank you.
I think that one of the reasons we tabled both education and health are that we feel like we had less influence over that areas as city council. And that will go into my next comment, which is, although I would love to be able to influence the Charleston County School District in terms of racial equity, I don't know that we have that much influence over it. And because we have now kind of backing up and looking at the whole Equity Commission report, one of the things that I would really like to know from all of the experts in the community who have studied these things is, what are the things that are sort of easier either politically or time-wise and will have an impact. Because when I look at it, not being an expert in many of these things, I think, okay, these are all great. It's overwhelming. What do we do first? And so some data would be helpful, but I think also there have been a lot of people who've worked on lots of aspects of this. And I would just like to hear from them, whether they're commission members or, CAGM or the public, to say, look, here's one that I think we could do really quickly and easily and would have an impact. And here's one we need to start working on now because that's going to take 10 years. And this is what our first step is. And so that would be really helpful, I think, for us.
Well, I was just gonna, I agree. I mean, I think our game plan for here tonight has sort of, maybe it's morphed. I really thought that we were always talking about the things that we could put before council. And let's just face it, before Councilmember Saccharin, leaves his seat, we wanted to have some accomplishments that he would be able to support as our main council representative with Councilmember Bowden and Councilmember Seekins. So I think we were supposed to be talking about the things that are either right in front that we want to have some immediate impact on, or something that could be accomplished in a very short turnaround time. And if I can just continue to maybe give Mr. Carol Fry, I think that Hark has the unfortunate position of having inherited a whole year and a half of study that started with the Avery report on disparities that studied the county statistics for 15 years, that led the Avery Center scholars and practitioners to come back to the region and say, here are the documented reasons why we need to take on housing, mobility, health, welfare, all of the 7 issues that are in that report. And because we were charged with hitting the ground running in July of last year, or whenever it was, we never really had the time to, we delivered the disparities report to all of us, but even some of our newer members just sort of came in and it was given to them. I don't even know if you got it, right? So I think we've done ourselves an injustice by not going back to the beginning of why we can believe that the topics that we're addressing for recommendations to the city council have very deep rationale, statistical reasoning, and outside experts that provided these to the city as a resource. And I'm happy to be part of a little study group that goes to the disparities and sort of, takes them apart so that we can believe them and proselytize with them. I think that's a good thing for us to do. But I don't think we can not do our immediate task, which is to put some things on the council's desk before Jason Saccharin leaves his seat on January 10th or whenever that is. So I would like to do the low-hanging fruit conversation.
I was just going to follow up on what Bonnie and then Carol kind of went into it a bit, but the reason I went with priorities I went with is because there's a time factor. I mean, if you've got enough time to make sure that everybody is economically in a good place, well, that probably starts with education, but none of this is happening tomorrow. There are things that, thanks to the folks that just left, we've got a racial bias audit that's just been completed. So there's things that we could do right now, the low hanging fruit, that's what I made my priority, because you know what, we can have another priority next year.
Yeah.
I think the implied conversation priority criterion, right, had to do with low hanging fruit that incorporated one of these things. There's council proposal or action in the area already. There is public discussion, right, about it in a public process that we could be involved with, right, or become informed by, all right, that we can inform. There is something, it touches in some way on the special commission report recommendations and or the master plan. So I think if you look at these, they kind of fall into that kind of criteria. The next, yeah, I think that's kind of the conversation, how we got there.
Well, that's helpful, Jerry, because, as an example, what you just said is, if you develop a matrix and say, okay, well, it's really important that we take low hanging fruit. Okay, well, now you've got, and you have to weight that, say, okay, well, that's 80% of the importance of why we would choose something, is that it's low hanging fruit. All right, what's the other 20%? And so that's all I'm saying, is that putting putting a little thought into it and putting it in writing helps us see that. And then to me, is helpful in terms of transparency for anybody who'd come to us and say, well, why did you choose these? And we could say, well, here's the reason we chose these as the things that are best to work on. So I would be willing to take a shot at just developing a matrix and bringing it in or sending it out via email, and everyone can take a look at it and we'll see what we think about it. So I'll commit to doing that. You know, certainly for me, I think that would be helpful, and hopefully it would be to everyone.
So one of the things that I think we need to deal with is that we're flying this plane while we're building.
Exactly.
Okay, so the matrix is fine. The notion, however, that as I understand, let's take the Board of Architectural Review as an example.
Right.
The recommendations, potential ordinance language is being could be in the works. And part of what it is that we want to do is usher that along. And in terms of timing, as Carol has indicated, it would be excellent to have it introduced while Jason is still on the city council. So that, I mean, that is one of the reasons, you know, that particular piece, while we look at fitting other items into the agenda. In addition, if you notice reading the press recently, the Port Authority has hired a consultant
Right.
to do some related development to
Be a new master planner for the port.
Union Pier, and the College of Charleston Center is supposed to be doing a public process.
Yes.
That's underway now.
I have an update on that.
Right, we asked Carol, Jackson, and Alvin, all right, to be the point on us, to bring us information about that, so we can be in that shooting war. And as we've already reported, next week, the report on the assessment of the racial bias audit implementation recommendations will come out, which will have recommendations. All right. And you know, that's a right now proposition as well. So we need to move forward.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to get your matrix. I think that would be very helpful to my other side of my brain. But I do think that you used a word just now, Jerry. We need to trust Jason Saccharin, who has been the council member promoting this change to the BAR small regulations for legacy housing owners, people who have historically been associated with their property either through their grandparents, you know, their ancestors, and now it's theirs. They may not live here. There was a test case for that, but it's legacy owners. And that's what Jason is going for, to make sure that we don't gentrify people away from their family home just because we have a very tight parameter of who's eligible and who's not for that kind of consideration, and who must go through the hoops. So I think that that's a fine example of, we're just let's just call ourselves Hark Bleeding Hearts on some level of wanting equity to be part of the cultural norm in our city. And we're not going to be the experts to say, okay, this language in this BAR amendment is just what we want. We have to support whatever they come up with that Jason says, this is what I'm going to put in front of the council. And then we're going to just give him our good. It's long overdue. And I think the same thing will be true of the components of the Union Pier plan. We need to find the place where we want to make a difference, to have a permanently available local business district that can be majority Black, as legal as we can make that as a within, you know, fair housing law in the state of South Carolina. We don't need to second guess what the layout will be or anything like that. So I think that would be a very helpful way of us sort of looking at our mission. Is we're not going to tell the Charleston Housing Authority, you know, how to redevelop their properties to keep them to make them have a whole nother 50 years of better housing for the people that they serve. We're gonna make sure that they do that, but we're not gonna tell them how to do it. So that's just where I'm coming from. And the other thing I think we need to have on our agreement, or at least working on it in the next week, is how will we be presenting this to council? Because if they get this list, they're gonna say, what does it mean and how did you get here? So we have to have some framework that we explain, what does it mean and why are we putting it in front of them and what do we expect next?
With that in mind, first, can we get a consensus agreement that these three items will be our priority? These three areas that are the top three ranked for purposes, and we can even look at this as this is a lame duck agenda. All right. So the Union Pier Renaissance District was number one. The amendments to BAR 2, and the racial bias audit 3. So those three not in 1, 2, 3. So BAR, the question is, what are the amendments? Where are they? The question going to the Community Development Committee. Where are you on that? With the racial bias audit, assessment audit, we heard from the folks from Cajun tonight that the request is that there be broad community conversation about the report. Okay, we can communicate that to the Public Safety Committee, and indicate that if we think that's appropriate after hearing the report of their plan, we can comment, or we can simply say we want to be part of that process. One of the things that we
I think the ask of council is that they get back to the agreement that they had when Chief Reynolds made it. Why should that change?
That's two different things. All right. The agreement that, as I understand it, was to have a discussion about the data that was in the annual reports, okay, around use of force and disparities and those sort of things. The department had made some changes as it relates to how it collected data, and present that information. And there was a request to have a public discussion about that. That was the agreement with Cajun and the police department presenting to the public. The question of what is in the assessment report, this report, the consultant's report, is a separate entity, right? In the contract, there is a line that says that the University of South Carolina consultants will participate in a public presentation to the public. Now, there's a present to the city council and there's a public presentation. What we heard tonight was an ask, okay, that we encourage how that's shaped. Okay, that's the first step. Then when we get the report, there may be things in the report, all right, that we think we should advocate for, or council should take action on. But that's stage 2. With stage 1 on that, in terms of low-hanging fruit, from a timing perspective, is to make certain that there is broader public discussion around the report. And if that means Cajun and the police department, Clark and the police department holding meetings, or government services, the entity, doing something, however that looks, that was an ask put to us tonight. Right. And around the Union Pier piece, we wait to hear from you and Alvin, okay, in terms of what it is that we ought to be doing in short order, what the next step is in terms of our engagement and involvement in that.
Okay, I mean, I have some suggestions about that, but I don't entertain them right.
Yeah. But to your right, to your point about, if we adopt these, what are the next steps? Next step on BAR, right, is to get, and what we're asking for tonight actually was information about what are the proposed changes, where in his legal department preparing those so we can move those forward. and to ask the Community Development Committee to agendize that and act on it, using Jason as the lead on that.
Yeah, I mean, I really think that our ask tonight of the BAR is for us to say it needs to be scheduled back at the Community Development Committee to review the draft amendment. We don't really care what the amendment is as long as it satisfies the
We're
sponsor
saying the same thing.
and benefits the legacy
We're
owners.
saying the same thing.
Right. So we don't need to see it first. We need it to go to the Community Development Committee.
So, first step. Are we prepared to adopt these three? As I call named up.
I'm-
Now,
I move that we adopt these three topics, union peer, VAR, and racial bias assessment as our priorities.
Second by Adam. Further discussion?
Can we just say, establish a Renaissance district at Union Pier? As a more clarifying goal for us.
Okay, so the language should reflect the Renaissance District as a relation.
And just when it comes to the BAR stuff, if Jason needs a hand, I've got a fair amount of experience editing federal policy documents. If he needs a hand, I'm here for him.
I think he has too many hands in the stew.
Yeah, my understanding is that there's nothing before the Community Development Committee because it's illegal. So what our thing is, hurry up, get it into committee.
Right.
I mean, that's in essence what
Right.
our next step is.
Exactly.
Okay.
I guess the only, I have no disagreement, I think these are good priorities, but I do have the question, when will we then choose the next priority? Because I want to lobby again and more to this committee to get something done about affordable housing that currently exists.
So
This is
the,
opening gate.
So, for me, I guess I look at this and I say, okay, well, this obviously could take a long time, but I'm looking at it, I guess, as sort of like 2 quarters, like, the last quarter of this year and the first quarter of next year. And certainly by the middle of next year, I would hope we're able to say, okay, we've made enough progress that we can now look at another, priority also.
Point of order, we need to vote on this motion before we have other discussion.
okay, I got that. I was taking that as a comment about. He's speaking not exactly against the notion, but trying to make sure that his get a caveat, okay?
Did somebody second you, Bon?
I did.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, adopt, moved and appropriately, seconded, to adopt the three, items, so enumerated as priorities in this immediate quarter. Yes, Carol,
How about if we say as our first set of priorities?
as first set of priorities to be forwarded to city council. To interact with city council, right? Any unreadiness? All those in favor, aye. Opposed, nay, abstentions, so ordered. The question that you raised about, actions raised by Adam's comment about the Board of Education and your comment, about the,
Housing.
current housing issues in places like Gaston Green and Floyd Manor and things of that nature. Which are right now issues.
Right.
What is the pleasure of the body in terms of addressing Carol's concerns and Adam's concerns?
I think that we should convene a working group to get our ducks in a row about, it's the housing, the 2 housing, communities that Carol put in front of us are similar, but not exactly the same as the analogy between the city's authority and the school board's authority. So each one of those properties, Floyd Manor is owned and operated by the Charleston County Housing Authority, which is a distinct authority that has its own bonding and its own set of operations that are sponsored by the county, but they don't report to the county. And the Gadsden Green is owned and operated by the Charleston Housing Authority that has the exact same construct. Those housing authorities would exist whether there was the city or the county. Regardless, they would find another home for their sponsorship by government. So I do think we need to do some homework that gets us all on the same page and then figure out where our leverage is and where it's not, and emphasize that.
Sounds good.
When?
Oh, day after Christmas.
Bob?
Or January 2nd.
We're moving into a very busy season, and I like what you're saying. I think a working group is probably not going to be effective until January.
But we could like study the, the questions that we
There's
have.
some baselines, good time to review documents, prepare for things, and then start getting together probably in January.
I will note with my CAJM hat on that, just for the record, CAJM just had its Community Problems Assembly, and CAJM voted unanimously to take on what's happening with the school board as its primary issue for the upcoming year. So CAJM is on that issue. You can count on it. So,
That's very important.
yeah.
So what I'm getting is that we're moving on what I'm calling the lame duck 3 to get moved now in the last end of this quarter before the new council gets seated to put our flag in the ground, if you will, on those issues. Right. And then right behind that to look at more specific affordable housing issues as in the context of what's been raised by Carol Fry. And we'll keep our ear to the ground on what's happening around youth and education because I have a slightly different take on it than Jason. The fact that we do pools and summer programs and recreational kinds of situations can also be part of the learning, reducing the learning loss. Okay. And while the city doesn't control those hundreds of thousands of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars that the school board has and doesn't have employees responsible from X hour to X hour for students, there is something there is something, and I think Jason believes that's true. He's just saying that that's the tail wagging the dog or the dog wagging the tail. So I think there's opportunity for that. Okay. All right. So it does not seem that we have the experts here, but we don't need that. We're going to proceed with the asking Jason to help us move the BAR piece forward to the community development piece. Yeah, we voted. No, we voted. There was a presentation. The presentation that may have made us. So we're now at open discussion. Would anybody want to bring anything to the table?
I would just say that we didn't have that meeting last month because of the city event standing up for Israel. In the weeks that followed that, I became aware of Muslim and Palestinian citizens of the city who were sort of feeling left out. There, of course, have now since been vigils for Palestine, but there's woundedness and hurt all the way around. And I would just say, with my pastor hat on, I have been in conversation with my colleague, Jeremy Rutledge at Circular, and Rebecca Hines at the Unitarian Church, and we are trying to figure out an opportunity to gather the community to pray for all the victims, all the needless deaths that are happening all the way around. I just want to note that for the record, because I think in the area of racial conciliation, I think it's important for us to keep that in mind.
I would totally second that. I think that I've never really liked our human Affairs name, but in the understanding of the hurt and the need for a healing, I think that this is the time to major on our human affairs sets of responsibilities. And I mean, as a citizen, I'm just still really wrestling with why we're not being called together to sit in a room and mourn, but also understand that there are divisions that could at least be identified in a time such as this, if not put in a better category of reconciliation. So I think anything we can be part of.
Yeah, and I guess my point is, what's happening in the Middle East is happening in the Middle East, but we have control over our own communities, and there's rising acts of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia that are happening all over the place. And I think there are opportunities for us as a community to try to stand up for conciliation and integration in our city and beyond, although it's admittedly very, very delicate, delicate work. Yeah.
Other comments?
Yeah, I stand for Israel. Israel did not start this, and I condemn Hamas and what Hamas did. And that's why we are where we are. I stand with Israel today, tomorrow, and forever, because that's what I believe. I believe the facts justify that's what happened. It's horrible what's happening in terms of the human toll. And, I think people are working their very best to try to minimize that. But had Hamas not done what Hamas did, we wouldn't be here today. And,
I think Hamas wins when we start
That's right.
turning on one another. And I
No,
think that's what I'm talking
we're not
about. Yeah,
turning
yeah.
on one another, but I'm standing up for them. And I'm not going to stand up for anyone else who's going to come and say, well, this was justified. And, you didn't say it's justified. I just want to know, everyone to know that I stand with Israel. And that's, for me, the facts justify that. So, and so I just want to make sure that my position is clear on that.
So I had a conversation with the mayor a couple of days ago. And I asked the question about the human affairs component of the city. If the people who are feeling injured or alienated or at each other's throats, where do they go? Right. To try to get that healing and come together. All right. To make certain that, right. To make certain that what is happening externally, right, doesn't cause harm here. All right. And he was saying, he had said to Adrian, Hart should pursue its human relations component relationship. The gentleman from their staff was supposed to come to our meeting tonight, and he was unable to come to the meeting. But that function, okay, human affairs, right? I mean, and I don't know what the modalities or tools in their toolkit is that they have, and how or whether or not it would be applicable here. If we adopted it, would it be effective? All right. But that conversation certainly gets accelerated, all right, by what we heard, what we're experiencing nationally in this time frame. The point, that there are people who had violence visited on them over time. And, it's the eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. We got people who are blind and can't talk, can't eat. And our society gets weakened. And I think that perspective is one that we're challenged in this moment to kind of hold up as a community and as a people. And Adam, I appreciate your comments and as well as yours, Carol. Other good of the order comments, questions, concerns, right? We recall that you should anticipate seeing some recommended priority out of our conversation in the from our October 20th. So when you get that, please do respond back. It's pretty good that we had 8 of 13 give responses to the priorities, the city council priority list, but it'd be even better if we had 13 out of 13. So if you see your colleagues and want to nudge them a little bit, that's okay with me as well.
So Ken, maybe you have it in your head. Can you just explain to us then? Now we have our 3 things, the first set of our priorities. What will happen next from our side of responsibility?
So from our side of the responsibilities, we will tell Jason to please connect with the Community Development Committee. And we'll communicate that we're asking that the BAR amendments be up on the agenda specifically sometime in November or December for discussion. I anticipate him responding that, you know, legal's got to draft something, okay? But certainly he will initiate that and we will get feedback in terms of when we can expect that to go to the Community Development Committee. As it relates to the racial bias audit, I've already communicated to Peter, asked Councilman Shahid what at his meeting on Tuesday, will there be an opportunity for individuals from HARC or CPAC to ask questions to the presentation? And he said he will try to make that available. Once we see what the report is, then we'll make additional recommendation in terms of next step. Maybe perhaps you raised a good question, Carol. Cajun has indicated a desire, right, to see HARC initiate public hearings or public discussion. Do we want to pass a motion that we should do that and work through Adrian and the various city agencies necessary to coordinate to create that kind of those kind of meetings?
I think something just a little more visible and immediate. How about if we send an ambassador to the city council to make a public comment on Tuesday, that we now have 3, you know, very time sensitive and prioritized recommendations that we're putting on our plate. They all involve council at some level of decision-making or implementation. And we can name them as a very simple list like you did, but that we should make an overt statement that we have something that we want council to be attentive to, as opposed to trying to go through the channels that we normally do and then who knows what happens.
Okay.
It's diffused. So
Okay, if that's a recommendation, to make a statement on the city council, at the city council meeting on the 14th about these priorities. If that's the will of the body, and we add that to the already approved resolution. I see heads nodding in that regard.
yeah, and can we frame it that we're doing it in a timeline that is respectful and honoring of Jason Saccharin's council service, and especially as, you know, the longstanding co-chair and member of the process from day one, from the special commission all the way till Tuesday.
You want to write the statement?
I can try.
Is there any reason not to accept that as part of the motion to adopt these 3? Okay, great. So that does not obviate, I think, the need,
The railway. yeah.
the need to do those other things. All right, and I guess, again, this is a question of work now. Are we prepared to say, as it relates to the public meetings, that we are prepared to sponsor those, with Cajun or some other entity? How do we want to frame? Well, it may be finding a place, right? It may be making certain that it will be making certain that how it's advertised is consistent and appropriate with what can be done under our charge, right? What, if we can use the logo, et cetera, et cetera. What the formatting is, deciding how the formatting is. I mean, there's one thing that we simply could say, if we knew what Cajun or the NAACP or whoever, Moms for Liberty, whoever was having the activity and said, oh, here's a run of the show, will you sign off on it? That's one thing. Right now, we don't have that, right? So the definition of what it means to be a sponsor or to initiate it is unclear unless y'all want to define it now.
I think we should go sponsor, of course, I'm.
I think in the list of things that we know are facing our city, that we couldn't find a better group to, be working with. So I would agree with that. They've also taken on Gadsden Green to some big extent too.
But this particular situation would be public discussion about the racial bias audit assessment and its recommendations and what happens next with it and communicating to the public.
In terms of alignment of our mission with.
Yeah.
Cajun.
Again, I'm as much saying because this is being recorded, I want folks to clearly understand what we're talking about. Any strong feelings? So, in response to the request from Cajun, we will pursue organizing, being involved with as appropriate and within our capability, public discussions about the racial bias audit assessment report. Okay. Y'all are tough.
Gary, did we skip over Adrian?
I'm sorry.
We did.
We'll make sure we don't skip over her report.
All right, Adrian.
No, I was gonna let Jerry know, but he, most of his points were most of my updates as well. So being that it was a fruitful discussion, I didn't want to interrupt, but thank you, Carol. So, as Jerry mentioned, most of the things were the same items that I was going to give my report on tonight, but I also wanted to lift one important thing that the city is doing. I was in an initial meeting with Jerome Smalls. So Jerome Smalls is a special assistant and he does special projects with the mayor's office. And we partnered in the LGBTQ plus advisory council. So we know that there's a Latinx and the mayor also has, I believe it's the Ministerial Alliance.
Yes.
But they didn't have a LGBTQ plus advisory council. So that's one that we're working on that council, on that initial meeting. It was I believe it's We Are Family and AFA. So Chase Glenn was on there too. And AFA, for those who don't know, is Alliance for Full Acceptance. And I thought it was important, being that we are the human affairs. I actually like the human affairs part. And racial conciliation. So we know that there's all nationalities that are involved in the community. And the city used to have a LGBTQ plus employee resource group. But when COVID happened, it kind of diminished. So we're also trying to pull that together. And I'm looking to pull together more employee resource groups for a sense of belonging. But that is, and also November is Native American Heritage Month. And so they're going to give a proclamation to the Wassamasaw tribe on Tuesday as well. That's what I have. Thanks.
Any update on the Riley Center tracking proposal?
No, I spoke to Marla and she'll be at our meeting on Friday. So at that meeting, so with the Raleigh Center, they're they're looking to pull forth a proposal for tracking mechanism for those priorities that we, at the joint visioning session meeting, the Raleigh Center is going to work with Goodstock and Hart and the Racial Equity Core team to do a monitoring tracking for accountability. But Marla will be on that meeting on Friday.
And that, the concept there is to help us with our publicly facing accountability.
Yes, yes.
Notion of a user-friendly, accessible to the public, what's going on in this
Yeah.
particular area.
Yeah.
That's the emphasis.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, y'all. Is there anything else to come before the body?
Give us a highlight of the ends burial ground celebration.
So the
I knew about that.
last reception announced that of the $1.2 million for the project,
Right,
they've raised 900,000.
oh, right.
It is anticipated that the project can be completed sometime in 2024.
Tell Tom what it is, he probably doesn't.
So on the grounds where the Gilliard Center is constructed were found remains of African descended people who had been buried there. Those remains had been removed. They have since been reinterred on the site, and the Nigel Redding approached the city with the idea, and there's currently a little plaque. All right, he said this ain't good enough, and he and a group of citizens have identified a sculptor who's developed a monument, which is in essence a fountain with hands and water, and I'm doing damage to the work. And
Adrian's hands are. in it.
Adrian's hands are amongst the hands. The hands are relatives of folks who share DNA from the remains that were found. So the Ancestry Burial Ground project itself
Right,
has done extensive research identifying where these people came from. They're going into the analysis of what kind of health problems they had. And it's a cutting edge kind of investigation in terms of what you can do in terms of discovering how people lived and telling the full story. So they're pursuing that. The monument is being constructed on the grounds. There's an attempt to make certain that is going to be a digital kind of communication about where other burial grounds are in the city. So there's a whole project evolving around it, but specifically what they were holding up was the notion of this monument is going to happen. Yes, sir.
Well, I got kind of interested beyond the monument with all the other stuff that we're going to be able to find out. Is that the South Carolina Department of Archaeology, or
No,
who's doing that?
This is
Because we have one and
this
they're
is
very
the
good at that
Henderson
kind of thing.
Street Burial Ground Project, which originally was the Gullah Society, and it's evolved into the project. They have partnered with University of Pennsylvania and other national organizations. So it is a freestanding nonprofit or operation. Is pretty amazing. It's amazing.
We got resources in state though that they might be able to tap into also.
They are trying to take advantage of all the states, which leads me to an important, I think, point. There was a lot of activity happening in Charleston. In our September minutes, there was a a comment about the Martin Luther King Summit in January, the thing that the Y does on an annual basis. Right. And Carol, you were going to follow up with them to see if there was some interface with what Hark is doing or should be doing in that regard.
apologize.
But I use that as an example. The Emancipation Proclamation Association has been doing Emancipation Day celebrations for 157 years. The events that I have attended that are sponsored by African descended organizations are primarily populated, the audience generally populated are Black people. All right, so the opportunities for the conciliation part of our work is going underachieved. There are great events happening, that happening the other day in the literary festival. There was a lecture by a woman who did a book, and I'm forgetting her name, about the story was about a biography of the first Black assistant librarian of the Library of Congress, who was the assistant librarian at the Library of Congress in 1890 something. Wow. All right. And the whole Black middle class, upper middle class community, and how that was an outgrowth of Reconstruction. But then when the Jim Crow era came, what that looked like, that audience was 95% white. All right. Not many Black folks. So I'm just saying that we are a lot of good stuff happening, but the audiences are very segregated. Okay. And that's a reality that I observe. I think you probably, if you flip back to things that you've gone to, that might be the same way. That is something that's part of the culture, right? It's not the policy, it's part of the culture that perhaps we need to be thinking about. What does that say about us? And is that helping us build community? And what might we do collectively in that regard? So you're thinking about that, leave here, that's additional homework. Anything else to come before us? If not, we can stand adjourned. Thank you.